Welcome to the Family Milk Cow podcast, where in every episode I cover topics that equip you with the skills and know how to look after your girls in the barn. Family milk cows are more than just livestock, they are a part of our families. They deserve the best care possible from knowledgeable and responsible owners. So pull up a chair or your milk stool and let's dive into another episode of the Family Milk Cow podcast. Hello, my friends. We're going to dive straight into this episode of the Family Milk Cow podcast, talking about how to preg check our cows. Before I dive into that, I suppose I should say, hi, my name is Kelsey Wolf. You can also find me on the blog and YouTube channel, Rough and Tumble Farmhouse. Now, I'm recording this episode quickly because I have to get this done before my husband has to get back to a work meeting. So let's see if we can sneak this in here quick over his lunch break. Now, it's really important to be able to tell if your cow is pregnant, and the sooner you can do it, the better, so that way you can attempt to get them bred again as soon as possible. The reason why, of course, we breed our cows is so we can get milk from our cows. Unless you have a cow that comes to you already in milk, they will need to have a calf before they will produce milk that you can then have for yourself. Now, there are several different ways you can preg check. Some are more expensive than others, some are quicker and easier than others, and we're going to run through kind of all the options here. The first thing is you just want to look to see if your cow comes back into heat. And we have talked already in a previous episode about heat cycles and what that kind of looks like. And so you can just pay attention and see right around the time they should be coming back into heat, are they exhibiting those signs? So this is honestly one of the quickest ways to tell if your animal is pregnant. It's not 100%, but you want to look for those signs of heat. And if they're not showing back up, then chances are good your cow's pregnant. This is one though too, I typically, even if I see them not come back into heat, I like to sort of check again. I pay attention again when their next heat, even after that, is supposed to arrive. Because sometimes a pregnancy maybe takes and then they can lose the pregnancy, or maybe they just weren't really being obvious about their heat that time. This has caught me a few times where I had thought they were bred and it turns out that they weren't. I used to be really, really good at heat cycles and keeping track of that and just kind of noticing, but that was before I had three small children. And so the amount of time I get to just kind of be out with my animals is way less. So I have a harder time catching those heats and being accurate about those heats than I used to. So this is one of the first things you can kind of look for, but I would personally follow this up with another sort of confirmation. Another option you can do is have your vet come out and palpate the animal to see if they can feel for signs in there of there being a calf. This can be done at around 35 days post breeding, and it's going to cost you, it depends on where you live, how much your vet charges. On my vet, it's $59 just for him to come to the property, and then to have him check to see if they're pregnant. It's called a preg check, is $10. So this is honestly probably the most expensive option, coming in at just shy of $70 to have your animal checked. And what they do is they reach in through the rectum and they palpate and feel for signs of pregnancy. Something else your vet might be able to do for checking for pregnancy is through an ultrasound. And with cattle, they do it transrectally. So they are putting a probe in through the rectum and looking again for the calf down in there. This can be done at 28 days post breeding, and they are going to be able to see a heartbeat. They can also tell you if there are twins in there. And if you have it done between 55 and 70 days, somewhere in there, they can sometimes even determine what the sex is of the calf. Another benefit of this sort of preg check is that they can take a look at the ovaries of your animal and see if they have any sort of abnormalities. So, this might be something worth doing if you are having a hard time getting a cow bred, to have a vet come and do an ultrasound so they can take a look and see if they're noticing anything internally wrong with your cow. In terms of cost of this one, I'm not really positive this isn't something that my vet offers, but again, you'd have the cost of the vet coming out and then however much they charge for doing the preg check with an ultrasound. Probably my favorite way to check to see if your cow is bred or not is by doing a milk sample. And I'm just able to send a milk sample into our DHIA lab. And so, of course, your cow has to be in milk for this to be an option for testing for pregnancy. So, what I do is I go and take a sample of milk, I filter it, make sure it's, clean as if I was going to drink it. And then I just put it in a pill bottle, like an old prescription bottle, and I stick it in the freezer, leave a little bit of headspace so that way as the milk expands when it freezes. And then when it comes out, I tape the snot out of that thing. I've talked to them on the phone. They said, we prefer to have a sample come to us. We got to cut through a lot of tape than having a milky mess in the mail. So I tape through it like crazy. I freeze it so that way the milk is going to stay better. The sample is going to be viable, especially if I'm sending out samples in the summer. My DHIA lab is really close, so I typically, if I send it out on a Monday, they usually get it on a Tuesday, and by Wednesday, I have the results emailed to me. and it costs me $5 to run a test, and it costs about $5 to mail it. So this is, for me, probably the simplest way to do it, and it's pretty cost effective as well. The only downside is, of course, is it takes about 28 days. So if she did come back into heat after getting bred and I didn't notice it, we're going to have to wait for a second heat cycle away from the time I bred her before we can try again. So that's kind of a bummer. But for the most part, I don't think there's any way of checking pregnancy. Let me look at my notes here. I don't think any of the ways of checking pregnancy are sooner than that first miss heat cycle, if that makes sense. You can also send in a blood test for your cows. So you can collect blood on farm and send that in to test and confirm pregnancy. Those are going to cost you right around the same, probably about $10 to have that done. You can also do an on-farm blood test. These are pretty popular for people to do, and this looks like it costs around $15 to get one test. Of course, this is something you have to learn how to draw blood from your cow and do the tests, and it seems like it's not too complicated. I'll be honest, I have not done blood draws on my cow before. I just do the milk testing. So it doesn't seem super complicated to do, and it will cost you again around $15, and this can be done at 28 days post-breeding. So that's another option you can try as well. One last method of checking for pregnancy, and this one is not very accurate, and you also have to wait a really long time, so it's really not something that's really that viable, to be honest, but you can do a bump test where you bump for the calf. When the cow is in their last trimester of pregnancy, they're around 6 to 7 months pregnant, you can stand on the right side of the cow and kind of in that sort of little sweet spot where you're behind their ribs and sort of above their udder at sort of the soft spot on the side. You can just kind of put your fist against their side and gently kind of pump in and out. The idea is this is going to kind of jostle the calf in there, and as the calf jostles, you will feel them either kind of bump back against your hand or it might cause the calf to even move. Again, the problem with this is that you can't do it until it's really late in the game and you would have wanted to already try getting your cow pregnant sooner. And additionally, the calf might just be in a weird position where you're not going to feel them where you bump them. This is one, because of those reasons, that's just kind of a fun thing to do if you want to feel the calf in there, but it's really not something I would rely on in terms of doing a preg check. I think that covers just about all the ways you can see if your cow is pregnant. And I hope this year you guys all get your animals bred when you want to. We are at that point where I am at the calendar, counting around, trying to find the right days. We are this year going to be breeding Juneberry. She just turned 9, so this will be her, gosh, I'm not even sure what calf number this is for her at this point, getting Juneberry bred. And we also are going to be breeding her heifer for the first time this year as well. And I've been having a bit of a hard time tracking their cycles. I've really been trying to focus on it, but I mean, just yesterday, Juneberry was trying to, mount her heifer and had a little bit of discharge, but I also had noted a week and a half ago, I thought that maybe she was coming into heat. Her heifer is way more obvious, really mooey, really clear, so I don't think that's going to be a problem. But with Juneberry, I might rely on doing a little bit of Little Ice or something just to bring her into a really clear heat so I know for sure, because I definitely want to get them both bred this year. So I hope that this was helpful for you, and I really hope that you are able to get whatever cows you're trying to get bred. I hope they get bred on your first try and they have healthy pregnancies and happy little calves around 9 months from now. We are coming to just about the end of the first season of the podcast. We have one more episode coming out later this week. Sorry, this episode got out a little bit late. We had kind of a crazy weekend. And in our last episode, we are going to be tackling the topic of pasteurization, sort of the history of it, which is actually a lot longer than you might have realized. How it was used sort of in more modern times, how you can pasteurize things yourself if you'd like to, why you might need to, and why it's still used a lot in the industry. So we're going to dive into that topic next week. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of the Family Milk Cow Podcast. You can become a part of the Family Milk Cow Podcast by joining the Milkmaid Brigade, sponsoring an episode, or following along on social media. You can find links for all these and more, including show notes, at familymilkcowpodcast.com. If you love what you're hearing, please rate, review, subscribe, and turn on those automatic downloads. One of the best ways to support this show is simply by sharing it. And as always, make sure to give your girl down in the barn a good scratch behind the ears from me.